Welcome back to another chilling story of horror and mystery. Tonight, we dive into the strange whispers of the sea, the voice on the radio, and the lighthouse that refuses to sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with friends who love dark stories. Now, let's begin. The Frequency That Drinks the Sea, Chapter 1. The first transmission, the first night I slept above the shop. The sea would not shut up. It kept breathing against the breakwater like a great animal with a cracked rib, a slow rasp that threaded itself through the floorboards and into my dreams. Even with the windows locked and the fan on, the sound found me in the kettle cooling, in the glass bulb cooling, in the thin chain of the pole cord whispering against the lamp. Hollow Vale did that two things. It soaked them. Salt in the mortar. Salt in your teeth. Even the clocks here moved damply. I moved into the rooms over my uncle's locksmith's shop because grief makes you practical. When the lawyer slid the little brass key toward me and said, "It's all yours," I nodded as if I'd been expecting to inherit a life I'd never wanted. The shop smelled like oil and papers, a careful man's smell. Uncle Raffi had been the kind of person who filed the teeth of keys with a loop under his eye and a joke in his pocket. He used to say, "Lux are stories, Elias. Someone wanted to keep something in, or someone out." Then he died at his bench in a way that made the doctor use the word peaceful, and people in town brought casseroles in foil and said he was good, and then they stopped coming. So, a locksmith shop with a crooked sign, 2 rooms above it, and a view of a decommissioned lighthouse that still turned its blind face to the sea like a saint refusing to stop blessing. On that first night, I could not sleep. The walls ticked. The town ticked. Grief ticked. I got up, padded barefoot down the narrow stairs into the shop, flipped on the bench lamp, and sat where my uncle had sat. The stool wobbled the same way, one short leg insisting on a rhythm. On the bench was a cardboard box the lawyer had called miscellany. Inside, an old postcard of the lighthouse, back when its eye was still open, a tin of beeswax, a bar of soap, the color of old paper, and a transistor radio, the kind with a cracked brown leather case and a strap that had broken long ago. I thumbed the radio's wheel just to hear something other than the sea. The dial glass was crazed and fogged, but a thin red indicator still slid behind it. The radio was too heavy for what it was, like something with a secret stitched inside. It breathed alive on the second tristatic. A hiss, like a match not taking. I turned the volume too high by accident and flinched, then laughed at myself and brought it down. The shop felt smaller with the radio on, like the sound was knitting it tight. I began at one end of the dial. "Night radio is a crowded harbor. Preachers, old songs. A man selling knives that cut cans. Someone counting in Spanish. A weather report from a city too far to matter. In between, the snow thick, thin, suddenly empty as sky." I moved slow, letting each station resolve, then dissolved it. I don't know why I stopped where I did. There was nothing there at first. Just the breath of the machine, the breath of the sea. Then a tone. A sine wave so pure it made my back teeth hum. It held steady for 3 seconds, dropped into a second tone half an octave down, then returned to silence. I waited. The hairs on my arms stood up like they had their own ears. Another tone. The same pair, spaced exactly the same. And then a voice. I felt the voice before I heard it. Some arrangement of air in the little shop, subtle as a draft you can't find. Then it came through the speaker, thin, as if traveling too far on a tired wire. Good midnight, the voice said. It was a woman's voice, low, precise, with the careful neutrality of a librarian telling you where to find the Elias. Beautiful in a way that refuses to be noticed. There was no station ID, no call letters, no hiss of compression or delay. It felt like she was standing in the next room, speaking through the gap under the door. You are tuned to 1907, she said, the Keeper's Band. We broadcast on borrowed bones. Static crept in, as if trying to move a chair across the floor without waking anyone. I placed my fingertips on the bench, as though to steady the sound. Tonight, the woman said, we have 3 items. It was ridiculous that my body knew that phrase. 3 items meant a list. Lists meant groceries, chores, a normal life. I leaned closer to the radio. Item 1, she said, concerns a lock, a key, and a debt. The fan chain in the apartment above ticked faintly as if in answer. I looked up, then felt stupid for looking at the ceiling when the voice was in my hand. In the morning, the woman continued, a man will bring a brass padlock to the shop at the corner of Salt Lane and Bay. He will say, it's stuck on me like a prayer. He will be lying. He will bring it because what is inside the locker it once kept has already vanished. By evening, he will go to the harbor with stones in his pockets and let the tide take him. If you would stop him, tell him the locker number is a prime. Something in my chest went cold and deliberate. I looked at the cardboard box with the postcard of the lighthouse. I looked at the door glass, where the stenciled letters of Rafi's locks reflected backwards. Salt Lane and Bay. Item 2, the voice said. The dead will call from a number that begins with 415. Your first impulse will be to hang up. You will not. You will make. You will sit where the light hits the floor in a long blade. You will say, I'm listening. The person on the line will tell you where to find the second reel. I didn't mean to speak aloud, but I said second. There was no shame in talking to empty rooms after months of talking to none. Static, like a thought that had not decided what it was yet. Then, the voice again, softer. Item 3, she said. The lighthouse keeper will open his eye. A pause. Then the first tone again. Then the second. Then nothing but the sea. Pretending to be a radio and the radio pretending to be the sea. I sat for a long time without moving, because moving would make it real. Heat gathered under the desk lamp like a small weather. The metal cases of lock blanks glowed dully like teeth in jars. I turned the radio S volume down to a breath and set it on top of the tin of beeswax. As if bees could bless it, the clock said 12:14 a.m. Borrowed bones, I whispered, and then said it again to see if I could spoil it by saying it twice. I couldn't. The phrase sat in the room like a new piece of furniture you aren't sure you like yet. Sleep, when it came, was the kind with a trap door. I dropped through it suddenly, and then morning. A gull made a sound like a rusty hinge. Someone rolled a crate along the alley. The lighthouse, blind by ordinance, wore a shawl of fog. I went downstairs early, flipped the sign to open, and swept the front mat for the satisfaction of it. When I made coffee on the little hot plate in the back room, the kettle sang thinly, an old throat. At 8:03 a.m., the bell above the door rang, and a man came in with a brass padlock in his hand. He was the kind of man Hollow Vale makes out of its boys ropey, with a face weathered into indistinct kindness by wind. He held the lock like it weighed too much. His eyes darted to the pegboard where I kept keys of various shapes in a catalog only I understood. "Morning," he said. It stuck on me like a prick. I went very still. The room went very still with me. Even the coffee in its chipped mug decided not to ripple. "Can I take a look?" I asked, and took the lock from him. It was heavy in my palm, brass stinged, the brand stamped shallowly, the shackle scuffed. Someone had tried to open it with something that was not a key. It smelled faintly of salt and oil, and underneath, of the old metallic animal smells that tools have, which is to say, work. "What locker?" I said, because the radio had made me someone who had always been asking that question. He rubbed the back of his neck with a hand that had scars arranged like a constellation. "Storage. Up by the cannery." Was cleaning out my muskie. Just gave up. He was not lying. His fear was too simple for lying. Fear that something would be found or lost, those are distinct, and he wore the latter. "I can open it," I said, "but I'll need you to bring the locker number, or the lock's original key, something to prove it's yours." The man's eyes slid away, embarrassed that he had been born into a world that requires proof. "I can bring the paperwork," he said, "if I can find it." I rolled the lock in my hand. The radio's voice had been specific in the way fate likes to be. "Locker, prime. If I had courage, I could speak plainly now. Sir, someone will vanish from you by evening unless what? Unless I play chess with a voice on a borrowed band." "Name?" I asked instead. "Dan," he said. "Daniel Castor." He told me an address on Maple Row, and spelled it as if someone would punish him for misspelling his own home. He left the lock on the counter when I asked him to, agreed to come back after lunch with something to prove ownership, and went out into a morning that had the nerve to be ordinary. When the bell stopped shivering, I pressed my palms to the glass countertop and watched the curb where he had stood. There is a feeling you get when the world reveals it has an underside. You wonder what will spill out if you flip anything over. I pulled the radio closer. ridiculous to keep it near at noon, but Mania likes company. I did not turn it on. I only placed my hand on its leather case like one would test heat. Close enough to know, not enough to burn. At 10, the phone rang with a number that began with 415. I let it ring twice, then 3 times, to prove something to myself about who was in charge of what. I picked up on the 4th made tea with my spare hand, because I am absurdly obedient, and carried the phone and the mug to the front of the shop, where the light fell in a long blade across the floorboards. "Elias," said a man's voice, surprised to find itself steady. "It's Raph." My throat made a sound no one had asked it to make. I set the tea down too hard and stained the grain dark. "Uncle," I said, "because the dead are owed their titles. This isn't funny." "No," he said gently, "it isn't. I'm sorry. I am only the part of me that knows how to finish jobs. If he had said anything else, I would have hung up. I would have said a word like prank or cruelty into the air, and then carried on being a man in a shop with a lock. But my uncle had always been a finisher. He once came down in the middle of the night because he had left a pin vise crooked on his bench and could not sleep, confusing and incomplete with a mistake. "How are you calling me?" I asked, not expecting an answer that would respect the physics we had agreed on. "I don't know," he said, and the phrase landed in the room with the weight of a stone you realize is a skull. "I can tell you where the second reel is. If you want it, you don't have to want it." Tea steam salted the air. I could hear, faintly, through the line, something like wind passing through a metal throat. "Where?" I asked. The word felt like handing over a key. "In the lighthouse," he said, and my body obeyed an old superstition by glancing at the window, as if the blind tower could hear its own name and be flattered. "Under the keeper's cot. The board with the nail that doesn't sit right. You'll know it by the squeak." The lighthouse had been decommissioned 5 years ago. They'd fenced it ceremonially, as if embarrassment could keep something in. Kids still climbed at night to dare the beam that would not come. I began, and then remembered the voice. "The dead will call. Make tea. Sit where the light hits the floor." I was doing this like a recipe, and I didn't know if the cake was for my funeral. "Elias," Raffi said, "locks are stories. Someone wanted to keep something out," I said automatically. "Or in. Or to keep someone honest," he said. I could hear the smile in it, which made the room tilt. "The second reel will tell you about the first, and about the man with the stones, and about the third reel. If you're unlucky." The line began to braid itself with static, far away. A tone, pure and unbearable, almost like the one the radio had made, sounded and then was gone. "I miss you," I said, and did not care that it made me small. Grief is a kind of exactness. It demands you use names. "I know," he said. "Me too. Don't be alone more than you have to. People who listen to long-to borrowed bands forget their own frequency." Doncaster. I said. Maple heel. I know, Raffi said gently. A word that forgives nothing. Today is a day with its elbows out. The line went quiet with a conviction that suggested not a drop, but a door closing. I pressed the phone to my ear until it hurt. The way you press on a bruise to remind yourself where not to touch. I did not go to the Lighthouse immediately, because the shop is also a story, and stories suffer neglect. I sharpened a file I did not need to sharpen. I adjusted the chessboard of blanks on their pegs into a pattern only I could see. I listened to the kettle decide to cool. I told myself Dan would be back with paperwork, and I would be a man who did his job, and the sea would do its job, and dead men would not call from area codes with cable cars in them. At noon, Hana came in with the easy authority of someone who had always treated rules as suggestions. She ran the paper and Hollow Vale run it. Not owned it because owning had never interested her as much as running. She had a camera around her neck and a pencil behind her ear because she thought in captions. Look at you, she said, sweeping the shop with a glance. A civilian. I thought you'd be on a bus by now. Where would I go? I asked. Anywhere with dry air? She said. Anywhere the paint survives winter. She peered over the counter. You look like you haven't slept. I slept, I said, and then I heard a radio that I did not turn on. She raised one eyebrow in a way that meant I had bought myself 3 minutes of her attention. I told her, because Hana is the friend you tell the impossible to. She will not laugh, and she will not believe you, but she will act as if both are fine. When I got to the part about the phone call, she took the pencil from behind her ear and put it down on the counter. Area code 415, she said. San Francisco, did your uncle ever go? No, I said. He never left the county. He said airports were clocks that told lies. Hana looked at the radio, and the radio looked back in the way things do when they are waiting their turn to be significant. You want me to go with you? She said, not a question, to the lighthouse. I want not to want anything, I said honestly, but yes. We locked the shop with the modest drama of responsible people and walked out into a day that had decided to be audible. A truck coughing up the hill, wind drawing chalk lines on the water. The lighthouse sat on its knuckle of rock, pretending to be a church or a father. The chain-link fence was less a fence than a narrative about fences. The padlock on the gate was newer than it needed to be, which is always suspicious. Hana produced bolt cutters from somewhere. No small woman should be able to hide bolt cutters. For journalism, she said when I stared. Inside, the tower smelled like wet meat. The spiral stairs made the sound that spiral stairs make when they very recently decided to forgive their own bolts. We climbed past the plaque about the Fresnel lens that wasn't there anymore, past the graffiti jocks plus M equals 04 EVER, a small crown, a crude lighthouse with a crying eye. The keeper's room was smaller than stories make rooms. A cot, a table, a window with a view of the sea, shrugging shoulders. I felt the physics of the place press against me. The way wind insists, the way stone keeps arguments. Under the cot, there was a board with a nail that didn't sit right. Of course there is, Hana said, conversational, and the floor told the room a secret when I pried the board up. A squeal that spelled out a word like yes. Underneath, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a reel-to-reel tape. I held it like you hold a heart, careful. Idiotic. The label was written in a hand I did not know, but wanted to. Keep a second. The handwriting had the calm of someone who had arranged worse things in tidy ways. Do you own a reel-to-reel? Hana asked. No, I said, but the radio seems to think I will. Back at the shop, Don had left a note taped to the door. Found the papers. Be back. The clock said 3:17, the kind of time that refuses to give you permission for anything. We needed a machine, the kind you keep. Because your father kept it. I knew who to ask. Old Mr. Liangren, fix almost anything shop 3 doors down and 5 decades deep. He was in his window as always, nose in a magnifier, making a beige appliance confess. A reel, he said, pleased and not surprised. I have a tick, heavy as marriage, waiting for someone to remember that sound doesn't want to be small. He brought it out like a relic with side panels, brushed metal, spools that looked like intent. We set it on my counter. The machine made the room decide to be about listening. Power, Hana asked. We have it, I said. Whether we deserve it is another question. We threaded the tape the careful way, because care is a spell even when you don't believe in spells. The reels sat like 2 eyes that had chosen to focus. I pressed play. For a moment, nothing. Then a room breathed through a microphone. Then the tone, the same one. The one that turned a part of my skull into a tuning fork. Good midnight, said the woman from the radio. Not in a radio now, but in a room. This is the keeper. A chair moved. The sound of fingers arranging paper. Record of transmission, she said. For those who come after. Item 1. The debt with the lock is older than the man who owes it. Its bones go back to a winter with no fish. Item 2. If you are listening to this, you have already decided to listen too long. Drink water, eat bread. Remember that names are leashes. Item 3. When the keeper's eye opens, it will not be to save ships. I did not realize I had taken Hana's hand until she squeezed back hard. On the tape, the keeper, whoever she had been, whatever she had used as a name when names still mattered, read date. They were all upcoming, too upcoming. She read names we knew. Bettina, who ran the laundromat. there, at the bait shop. Mr. Liang himself, though not followed by an event, just followed by a tone it hurt to hear. She read numbers that sounded like coordinates and also like prayers. She read a locker number. And then she said something so quietly that the tape hiss almost hit it. Some things that call themselves prophecies are just late reports. The doorbell rang. It rang in the tape. And in the shop. The same bell. The same impatience. Hana hit stop so hard the reels complained. And the room went bright with silence. I exhaled a whole afternoon I had been saving. Dan stood in the doorway. Hair salt stiff. Papers in hand like someone who believed in process. He looked relieved by our presence the way the condemned are relieved by a schedule. Behind the relief, though, was something else. Something you only notice when a voice has told you what to notice. A thrum in him, a shallow angle like a man leaning toward a ledge. "I've found it," he said, holding up the storage contract. "Locker 17. Prime." I nodded the way people nod when they think nodding could bend a day to a better shape. "We can open the lock," I said, "but there's something we have to do first." "What's that?" he asked. And the fact that he asked, not demanded, made me want to keep him. "Sit," I said. "Have some water, and tell me who you think is missing." He blinked, puzzled, then obedient, then uncomfortable. "Grief is greedy. It wants witnesses." He sank into the chair by the counter and took the glass Hana handed him like an order. "My brother," he said finally. "It's stupid. He's just late. He's always late. But he left the locker to me in case he died." "You don't do that unless you know a kind of weather I don't." "What's in the locker?" Hana asked. Don smiled without humor. "He told me once he kept all his promises in there." "That's the kind of thing he would say." "We'll open it," I said, "together. And then you won't go near the harbor for any reason until we've had, say, soup." He laughed for the first time, just enough to prove he remembered how. "Why would I go to the harbor?" "Because it's a good place to think badly," I said. "We went to the storage place up by the cannery, where crows hold their meetings. The clerk did not care who we were as long as we were people with keys. The hallway smelled like cardboard and hope." Locker 17 waited like an answer that would not tell you the question. I knelt to the lock. It felt like a priesthood to do this with steady hands. I worked through a set of picks my uncle had made then. Particular, comfortable as words in a familiar mouth. The lock fought, then relented, then became story. Shackle released, lips parting. I put the lock in Dan's hand, because sometimes a man needs to feel weight leave. Inside the locker was not a body. Somehow that was a disappointment you could feel in the calves. There was a duffel, a shoe box, a photograph, a ledger with handwriting so precise it could cut. In the back, a reel to reel tape in oiled cloth, labeled Keeper Third. "I thought there'd be money," Dan said. "Half to us, mostly to whoever had taught him to always think there'd be money." He touched the ledger with 2 fingers. "These are bets," he said, surprised and not surprised. Hana tilted the reel. "Your brother?" she asked. "He'd like to know what was going to happen," Don said. Money's just another way to keep the future from acting brand new. The corridor hummed with fluorescent light, preparing to confess. I held the third reel as if me being careful would persuade the day to be. When we came back into the late afternoon, the lighthouse was visible through the gap between buildings as a pale shoulder. It looked impossibly as if the glass at the top had caught a piece of sun and decided to hold it. The keeper will open his eye, the voice had said. It should have been ridiculous. A decommissioned lamp cannot wake. A blind sing cannot decide to see again out of spite. But the glass had a different color to it now. A warmth where there should be none. Back in the shop, as if everything had been waiting politely for us to return. The radio clicked on by itself and breathed. The tone came a clean cut through the late-day noise and then the woman's voice, closer than before, threaded with something like relief and something like warning. "Good evening," she said. "We do not usually speak at this hour. Consider this a courtesy call from the wrong side of punctual." Static shuffled its feet. Outside, someone laughed, unaware their day was being laced. "Two things," the voice said. "First, do not let the man go to the water. Second, when the keeper opens his eye, you will want to look. You must not. The first things it sees will be the last things you remember." The radio went quiet again, as if exhausted by the exertion of being real in the wrong part of the day. Hana's hand found my forearm without asking for permission. "We need soup," she said, voice steady the way a bridge pretends to be steady when trucks test it. Dan swallowed, looked at the door, looked at the harbor in his mind. "It's just water," he said to himself. "Today," I said. "It's a mouth. We made soup in my small back room because soup is a spell, too." The three of us sat around a table meant for one and listened to the light fade like a tape ending. The reel-to-reel machine waited on the counter, patient, knowing that wanting to know is the oldest engine. When the sun slid down enough that the shop's window turned into a mirror and showed us ourselves three shapes with salt in their hair, something happened at the lighthouse that had no right to happen. The dead glass bloomed, not fully, not a beam, not salvation, but a pulse, a testing of a lid. Hana stood first. "If we don't look," she said softly, "we might live. Or we might miss the one thing that explains the other things." I said, which was the kind of thing people say when they have already decided to do the dangerous thing because the dangerous thing feels like an answer. Dan did not stand. He held the water glass in both hands like a sparrow. "My brother?" he said. "We'll find him." I lied with craft, but not in the water. The radio, as if impatient with our drama, produced the pair of tones one more time, and then the keeper's voice, urgent for the first time. "Borrowed bones can break," she said. "Choose carefully what you lean on." The lighthouse's glass turned its faint face toward town, and something in the shop's lights flickered. A tiny empathy. I felt the air change the way air changes before a storm, when the front moves through and your bones know before your mind gets the memo. We sat there, three mouths and a radio, and listened to the sea drink its breath. Somewhere, a lock I had not seen yet clicked open. Chapter 2, Borrowed Bone. The next morning, Hollow Vale looked the way it always did after a storm that hadn't quite arrived. Streets rinsed by a mist that wasn't rain. Windows that pretended to be clear but weren't. Gulls circling in patterns too precise to be random. I hadn't slept much. Not because of nightmares, at least announced themselves, but because my mind kept rehearsing the radio's voice, the phone call from the dead, and the weight of the third reel waiting on my counter like an unopened verdict. Don sat in the shop's back room, his elbows on the table, staring at the tape reels as if they might blink. Hana had stayed overnight, claiming journalistic duty, but in truth unwilling to let either of us be alone. She was sprawled on the cot upstairs, camera still around her neck, even in sleep, like a talisman against forgetting. The kettle whistled weakly. I poured 3 cups of tea, one of which would grow cold before anyone touched it. Locker 17 wasn't enough, Dan muttered, breaking the silence. His voice had the grainy quality of someone who hadn't spoken to anyone but ghosts in a long while. If my brother left me that, then he left me more. He was always hiding things inside of things. He thought secrets were a kind of currency. I pushed the cup toward him. Then the real is another currency. Another debt. Dan's eyes flicked toward the lighthouse visible through the dirty window. What happens if we play it? Before I could answer, Hana came down the stairs barefoot, her hair wild from sleep, but her eyes sharp. She caught our silence like a rope. You already know the answer, she said. You're just waiting for someone else to say it first. You'll play it. You can't not. That's how stories work. Her bluntness annoyed me and comforted me in equal measure. I threaded the tape into the machine with the same care as yesterday. Each movement a prayer, disguised as mechanics. The reels spun. Static, then a cough, an ordinary human cough, startling in its plainness. This is Keeper, the same woman's voice said, though now it carried fatigue, as if the act of speaking bent her ribs. Record 3. If you are listening, you are already on the list. Dawn stiffened. Hana leaned in. I felt my skin pull tight, as if bracing for something sharp. The list changes, Keeper said. Names arrive, names leave, but debts do not erase, only transfer. A scrape, like a chair on stone. Today's name is Daniel Castor. Dawn jerked back as if struck. The teacup tipped, spilling a brown comet across the counter. He will walk to the harbor at dusk. The voice continued. He will feel the water call his weight. He must not answer. If he answers, the eye will open wider. If he resists, the eye will wait. Either way, the eye will see. Silence, except for the soft tick of the reels turning. Borrowed bones, Keeper whispered. We all use them, but some debts require marrow. The tape clicked, spun blank, and ended. Dan's breathing had gone shallow, uneven. He pressed both palms to the counter as if to stop himself from floating away. She said my name. He whispered. She said my name like she knew me. Like she knew what I'd... He stopped. What you'd what? Hana asked. sharper than she meant to. Don swallowed. His eyes glistened like wet glass, like she knew what I'd been thinking last night when I stood at the harbor. Before I came here, I almost... He broke off again. I reached across the counter, set my hand over his fist. But you didn't. That's why you're here. That's the difference. The shop bell rang then, jangling the air with a violence that felt staged. All three of us startled. A woman stood in the doorway, soaked from the mist, clutching something against her chest. Her eyes were wide, pupils blown. "You fixed locks?" she asked, voice thin as paper. "Yes," I said, my own voice careful. She opened her hands. In them was not a padlock but a small wooden box, its brass clasp twisted and bent, as if it had been forced by something not quite human. "It was on my porch," she said. "When I opened it, there was nothing inside but the clasp." The box hummed faintly. "I don't mean metaphorically." The wood itself vibrated like a throat-holding back sound. Hana stepped forward. Kamaha freezed out of habit. "Who are you?" she asked. The woman blinked, as if remembering her own outline. "Bettina," she said, "from the laundromat." I exchanged a look with Hana. Bettina's name had been on the second reels list. Dawn whispered, "She's next." The box in Bettina's hands gave a single, sharp click. Not opening, not closing, just reminding us it had teeth outside. Through the fog, the blind lighthouse glass pulsed once, faint but undeniable, like an eye practicing how to open. Chapter 3. The box that hummed. The wooden box sat between us on the locksmith's counter like a live thing pretending to be still. Its bent brass clasped, trembled with a pulse that wasn't mechanical but rhythmic, like a second heart had been misplaced and found shelter in the grain of the wood. Bettina's hands shook when she let go of it. "It wasn't there when I locked up last night. When I opened the door this morning, it was waiting. I thought some kid left it, but when I touched it," she rubbed her fingers together as if still trying to rid them of the sensation. "It was warm, like someone had just been holding it." Dawn had gone pale, the kind of pale that comes from hearing your own obituary drafted in someone else's voice. He stepped back until his shoulders touched the shelves of blank keys. "Hana ever?" The journalist circled the box with her camera, snapping pictures, muttering captions under her breath. "Evidence. Artifact. Relic." The shutter clicks sounded like insects in the thick air. I reached forward, my locksmith's instinct stronger than my fear. The clasp had indeed been forced, not broken but bent in a way that metal resists unless it has help. I tried to close it again, but it refused, as if the box wanted to stay ajar, wanted to be known as open. "Empty?" I asked Bettina. She nodded quickly, eyes darting toward the lighthouse. "Empty, but not light." I tilted the box. "It should have weighed a few ounces at most. Instead, it dragged at my wrist like a bag of wet sand." Hana frowned. "That's right. It's a lock without a key," I murmured. Something was meant to be kept in or kept out. Now it's neither. The radio, silent since last night, crackled awake on its own. No one touched it. No one dared. The familiar tones rang high. then low. The keeper's voice seeped through, sharper now, strained, like a violin string pulled too tight. "Item 1, she said. "A box that hums when empty. Do not mistake absence for safety," Bettina whimpered, clutching her apron. "Item 2. The laundress will not finish her shift tonight unless the clasp is bent again at dusk. Metal remembers, bend it twice, or she will drown in soap." Hana and I exchanged a glance. Soap. Laundromat. The prophecy felt pointed in its cruelty. "Item 3, the keeper continued. "The eye prepares. When it opens, it will not look outed, will look in. Do not be where it lands." The tones repeated. Then silence, deep enough that we could hear the mist dripping from the eaves outside. Bettina whispered, "I don't want to go back to the shop." "You're not going back alone," I said quickly. "You'll stay here. At least until dusk. We'll watch the box." Don muttered from his corner. "What if watching is exactly what it wants?" No one answered. We set the box on the back table, draped it with a cloth, though the hum still pushed through like a heartbeat beneath the blanket. Hana made notes in her reporter's pad, each word etched with the pressure of someone carving stone. By late afternoon, the fog thickened until the street outside blurred into watercolor. The lighthouse's glass glimmered faintly behind the veil, testing itself. At 5:47 p.m., the box clicked once. At 5:48, Bettina screamed. The cloth over the box rippled, though no hand touched it. The clasp straightened itself with a shriek of metal healing wrong. Bettina's breath caught. She clutched her throat as if swallowing suds that weren't there. Foam bubbled at the corners of her lips. Hana reacted. First she lunged, tore the cloth away, and slammed the clasp down, bending it again with all the force of panic. The box screamed a sound that which shouldn't make then, went still. Bettina gasped, air rushing back into her like someone cutting a noose. She collapsed against the counter, eyes wet, chest heaving. Don crossed himself without irony. I steadied the box with both hands. Its weight had doubled, maybe tripled. Whatever absence had been inside it before now felt crowded, pressing outward. The lighthouse pulsed again brighter, longer, unmistakable. The glass at its crown glowed with a light that had no source, no right to exist. For an instant, it swept across town, not a beam, but a searching glance. Everyone in the shop froze, afraid to breathe. The light passed over us, but not through the windows. The shop remained dim, shadowed, save for now. The radio hissed once more. Keeper's voice came low, hurried, like someone leaving instructions on a machine they didn't trust. Borrowed bones are cracking. The eye will not stop. Prepare the fourth reel. Do not listen alone. The transmission cut. The box thudded against the table, as if something inside it had shifted, heavy and impatient. Dan whispered, "There's going to be a fourth reel," and though no one said it aloud, all of us knew where it would be waiting. In the lighthouse, beneath the eye that wanted to open, Chapter 4. When the eye opens. By the time dusk dragged itself over Hollow Vale, the whole town felt like it was holding its breath. Windows shut earlier than usual. Shopkeepers lingered in their doorways as if waiting for a signal to bolt. The sea itself looked wrong, its surface too smooth, too deliberate, as though it were trying on the disguise of calm. The three of us on a dan, and I stood in the locksmith shop with Bettina curled on the cot, exhausted but alive. The humming box sat under a heavy chain I'd wrapped around it, locked with 3 of my stoutest padlocks. The irony didn't comfort me. The lighthouse loomed beyond the fog like a bone that refused to heal. Its glass already glowed faintly, a sick eye straining against a lid. Dawn broke the silence first. If the 4th reel's in there, we have to get it before the light fully opens. Otherwise, he trailed off, but the unfinished sentence weighed heavier than words. Hana slung her camera over her shoulder. Then we go now. Her tone was final. I grabbed my uncle's ring of master keys, though I doubted any brass would matter where we were going. Stilocks are stories, and stories demand symbols. We left Bettina behind, the radio beside her like a guard dog that only knew one word. If it speaks, don't answer, I told her. She nodded weakly, clutching her apron like armor. The path to the lighthouse was slick, the rocks sweating mist. The chain-link fence was still cut where Hana bolt cutters had done their work the day before. The air grew colder with each step, as if the tower exhaled winter. Inside, the spiral stair groaned under our weight. The sound echoed, multiplied, became voices that weren't ours, whispering just out of reach. At the keeper's room, the cot had been dragged aside us, though something knew we would look there again. The loose board gaped open. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, waited the 4th reel. I lifted it out carefully. The label read only one word, written in a hand more frantic than the others. I. Impossibly heavy in my arms as we carried it up the stairs to the lantern room. If the eye was going to open, we needed to face it on its own ground. The lantern room was not dead, as it should have been. The great glass lens, long decommissioned, thrummed faintly. Light gathered within it, without flame, without filament light, like blood remembers itself. Hana set the machine on the steel floor, her fingers trembling only once as she threaded the tape. Dan stood by the window, staring at the sea as if daring it to answer back. I pressed play. The reels turned. Static? Then the keeper's voice, louder now, strained, breaking like surf on rock. Final record. Item 1. The eye does not see. lives us. Every thought we've tried to lock away. Every secret we've bent. Shut. It drinks. The glass lens pulsed, bright enough to paint the room in false dawn. Item 2. Keeper gasped. Borrowed bones cannot hold forever. The debt will be called. It chooses a witness. Always one. The rest vanish. Don stumbled back from the window, his shadow shuddering on the wall. "It's me," he whispered. "It's already me." The keeper's voice cracked into a scream. Item 3. Do not look when the eye opens. Do not. The tape warped, melted, the sound collapsing into a shriek. At the same instant, the lighthouse lens flared. Light tore through the room like a blade. Instinct screamed at me to look, but Hana grabbed my head, forced it down, pressed my face into her shoulder. I felt her shaking, not from fear, but from effort. Don was not so strong. His breath hitched once, then silence. When the flare faded, the lantern room was dim again. The machine smoked. The reel lay warped and blackened, its label burned away. Dawn was gone. Not collapsed. Not burned. Simply gone. The space where he'd stood was empty, the air still trembling as though it remembered his weight. Hana let go of me slowly. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say that would not break us. We carried the dead machine back down the stairs. Outside, the sea no longer looked calm. It looked satisfied. The lighthouse glass dimmed to its ordinary blindness, as if nothing had happened. Back at the shop, Bettina slept uneasily. The box still chained and quiet. The radio remained off, silent for the first time since I'd touched it. Hana sat on the counter, camera in her lap, eyes hollow. "What now?" she asked. I looked at the box, the reels, the empty space where Dawn should have been. My uncle's words echoed. Locks are stories. Someone wanted to keep something out, or someone in. "Now," I said. "Now we keep it locked, as long as we can." But deep inside, I knew the truth. Borrowed bones always break, and the Keeper's band would find another frequency, another listener, another story to finish. Outside, the sea whispered against the breakwater like an animal with a cracked rib, waiting for its next breath. And that's the end of tonight's story. Or maybe just the beginning. If you enjoyed this tale, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video with others who love horror and suspense. Stay tuned for the next story, and remember, some voices never really face